You've probably heard the horror story. Someone wakes up in a bathtub full of ice, a note taped to their chest. Call 911, your kidneys are gone. Most people laugh it off as an urban legend. And that version probably is. But organ harvesting isn't just a story, it's a system. And it begins with scarcity. Right now, over 100,000 people in the United States are waiting for an organ transplant, and 17 of them die every single day before their name comes up. I used to work on this problem. I designed devices that could keep lungs alive outside the body, and I watched organs, once thrown away, suddenly become transplantable. But that raised bigger questions for me. If technology can change what counts as viable, then who decides who gets access? Imagine being the surgeon with two patients, a child who needs a kidney and a prisoner whose body could provide it. What do? Do you take it? Do you wait? Or do you let the child die? Around the world, medicine faces questions like this, and the answers are never clean. Every conversation about organ harvesting begins with scarcity. There are far more patients in need of hearts, lungs, livers, and kidneys than there are available organs. Remember our stats from before. 100,000 Americans on the transplant list every year, and 17 dying per day. That's roughly one every 85 minutes. Scarcity feels like an unavoidable fact, but here's the twist. Scarcity isn't always natural. Sometimes it's manufactured. How is it that one organ donor can save 8 lives and enhance the lives of 75 more, and yet we have a shortage? In many countries, organs are wasted because of regulation, logistics, or lack of surgical infrastructure. The viable organs exist, but they don't reach the patients who need them. And I've seen this firsthand. I used to work in ex vivo organ perfusion, designing devices for the transportation and evaluation of lungs for transplant. I live and work here in Toronto, which has one of, if not the most highly regarded lung transplant programs in the world. And even here, up until recently, about 70% of donor lungs were rejected outright. With the devices we developed, we could preserve or even improve the function of many of those lungs. Suddenly, around 80% of what was once rejected could now be transplanted. The wait list for lungs dropped from about 18 months to just 6 weeks. Think about that. From a year and a half of waiting, watching your body deteriorate, and not knowing if you are going to get a transplant, to just over a month. The scarcity collapsed almost overnight. But here's the thing. Not all of those lungs were improving. Some of them were just fine to begin with. The technology just proved that they were viable. Which raises the question, what criteria were we using before? In Canada, the criteria for evaluating lungs are extremely strict, stricter than in many other countries. Lungs we rejected here might have been transplanted elsewhere. So while scarcity is very real in some places, in others, it's at least partly manufactured by the standards we set. And we expect this. I've talked about FDA regulations in my animal testing video, if you're interested in hearing more. But in these stringent regulatory requirements, many signs for even questionable performance are reason enough not to pursue the development of a drug, the marketing of a medical device, or even the transplant of an organ that has a chance of saving a life. And I'm not saying the criteria are wrong. There are many good reasons for them. But it shows how scarcity isn't just raw number of organs. It's shaped by external factors, by policy, by systems, and by design. Now, if scarcity is the matchstick, war and disaster pour gasoline on the fire. In conflict zones or after natural disasters, hospitals are overwhelmed. Oversight collapses and patients are vulnerable. And this is when exploitation spikes. Black markets emerge, families are pressured into selling organs, or organs are taken under duress. In India, entire kidney villages developed, where most adults had sold one kidney. Baiguni has about 6,000 people and is known as the village of one kidney, and about 3% of the adults in the region have sold a kidney. This is out of desperation, right? People are desperate to provide for their families, even if it means long-term health consequences. Or, usually the organ brokers involved aren't upfront about the risks involved. In China, prisoners were executed and their organs sold to international recipients. I believe it's $1 billion industry at this point. In both cases, the story told was about meeting medical demand, but the reality was far uglier. The powerful taking from the powerless under the guise of saving lives. As engineers, we like to think of ourselves as problem solvers, and having worked on some of these technologies that extend the viability of organs, I can tell you they do save lives, sometimes in surprisingly simple ways. If you can plan surgeries 18 hours in advance instead of 6, you can schedule your operating rooms more efficiently. And if you're not waking up your transplant surgeons in the middle of the night, 1, they're going to be way less cranky, but 2, you're going to reduce surgeon error. But for patients, the change is enormous. Before, if you lived 10 hours away from your nearest transplant hospital, you often had to relocate, like uproot your whole life to wait indefinitely and uncertainly for the call. With extended organ viability, you don't have to do that anymore, which is life-changing. But here's the paradox. Every solution creates new problems. Extending viability doesn't just save organs. It makes them tradable. An organ that once had to be transplanted within hours can now cross borders. That changes everything about who has access and at what price. Yes, it means a Canadian patient might get an organ from across the country, but it also means that a lung from Ecuador might end up in the United States, not because the recipient was the best medical match, but because a double lung transplant is the most profitable surgery. That's the double edge of engineering. The technology might save lives, but it also can turn the human body into a global commodity. Organ transplantation reveals brutal economics. The poor provide and the rich receive. Medical tourism has become an industry. Wealthy patients travel to countries where laws are looser. They receive organs from locals who may never get the same opportunity. In some countries, transplant centers rely on foreign patients' money to stay open, which means locals, the very people whose bodies supply the organs, may have worse access. Layered on top of this are cultural and religious beliefs. Some communities reject organ donation entirely. Others frame it as the ultimate altruism. These differences shape who donates, who refuses, and who ends up vulnerable. And then there's the question of autonomy. If someone is driven by poverty to donate an organ, can we really call it free consent? Or is it consent under economic duress? Let's push a little deeper into these uncomfortable truths. First, scarcity is sometimes just manufactured. We like to think of scarcity as a natural fact, but as I've seen, it's also a product of logistics, policy, and uneven distribution. Viable organs are wasted every day, not because they don't exist, but because systems fail. Second, engineering can create new markets. Every breakthrough creates unintended consequences. By extending organ life, we extend its marketability. And with marketability comes inequality. Third, winners and losers are pre-engineered. Triage lists, donor matching algorithms, even device design. These aren't neutral. They embed values into systems. They decide, quietly but powerfully, whose lives are prioritized. Fourth is the commodification of the body. Once we start calling organs resources, we've turned the body into a supply chain. And like all supply chains, it risks exploitation. In some ways, it mirrors extractive colonialism. The global south providing the raw materials, and the global north reaping the benefits. So, what do we do with this knowledge? On one hand, organ transplantation is one of medicine's greatest triumphs. Lives are saved, families are restored, futures are extended. But on another level, it is one of the clearest mirrors of global inequality. The poor still provide, and the rich still receive. As engineers and ethicists and citizens, we have to wrestle with this paradox. Our tools can save lives, but they can also scale inequalities. The uncomfortable truth is that scarcity isn't just about biology. It's about power, it's about systems, and it's about design. Until we address those, no technology will make organ donation truly just. Paul Farmer once said that the idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that is wrong with the world. And I think that's the question that organ harvesting leaves us with. Whose life and whose body do we value? If you're still here, thank you for watching. I really appreciate you being here. It's something I'm really passionate about, so if you have any thoughts, please let me know. I would love to discuss with you. And if not, take care.
It's getting much better now.